3 months ago, I uncovered a devastating truth. My wife was having an affair with my best friend. Today, they've both lost everything and are consumed by a mutual hatred. Allow me to recount how a construction contractor from Ohio orchestrated one of the most meticulously executed acts of revenge in recent memory. My name is Tom, I'm 41, and until very recently, I believed my life was perfect. My construction company specialized in luxury homes, consistently bringing in a solid 7 figures annually. My wife, Jessica, 37, was a local influencer with 50,000 Instagram followers, showcasing our idyllic life, our beautifully renovated Victorian home, exotic vacations, and an abundance of designer possessions. We had been married for a decade, and though we never had children, we seemed content building our empire together. The third cornerstone of this seemingly perfect existence was Kevin, my best friend since college and my business partner. He held a 25% stake in our construction company and expertly managed client relations, while I oversaw the actual building process. Kevin was the charismatic talker. I was the one who ensured the foundations wouldn't crack. Together, we had built something truly remarkable, both our thriving business and our deep friendship. Jessica had always possessed a naturally flirtatious demeanor, but it never caused me concern. She was an influencer, after all. Charm was an integral part of her brand. When she'd laugh a little too heartily at Kevin's jokes during our weekend barbecues, or when she'd lightly touch his arm in conversation, I simply attributed it to her outgoing personality. Kevin was happily married to Sarah, a kind elementary school teacher, and we regularly socialized as couples. Everything appeared normal, healthy, and successful. However, subtle cracks began to appear about 6 months ago, though I failed to recognize them at the time. Jessica started having more brand collaborations that necessitated overnight trips. Her phone became an almost permanent extension of her hand, and she'd smile at it in ways that were once reserved exclusively for me. When I inquired about her day, she'd offer vague responses about networking events and content creation meetings. Kevin, meanwhile, seemed to have an opinion on every aspect of Jessica's life. He'd compliment her new outfits, suggest restaurants for her business dinners, and even recommended the hotel she stayed at during her last collaboration trip to Miami. I genuinely believed he was simply being supportive of her burgeoning career. The truth struck me with the force of a sledgehammer one Tuesday morning in October. I had forgotten my laptop at home and urgently needed to access some client emails. Jessica was at the gym, so I casually grabbed her MacBook from the kitchen counter. Nothing suspicious about using your wife's computer, right? Wrong. So incredibly, devastatingly wrong. Her email was already open, and as I clicked to open a new tab, my gaze fell upon a folder in her downloads labeled KM Private. Kevin Mitchell. Private.
My hands began to tremble uncontrollably, even before my brain fully processed the implications of what I was seeing. Hundreds of photos. Kevin, shirtless, in what appeared to be a hotel room. Jessica in lingerie I had never seen before. The two of them intimately entwined in positions that churned my stomach. But the photos were merely the prelude. I opened their text message thread and felt my entire world crumble. 18 months of messages. 18 months of, "I love you and I can't wait to be with you and Tom has no idea." 18 months of my wife and my best friend meticulously planning a future that conspicuously excluded me. The messages laid bare every sordid detail. The affair had begun during what I naively believed was Jessica's business trip to Miami. It was, in fact, a romantic getaway with Kevin. Every subsequent brand collaboration was a carefully constructed lie. Kevin had been bankrolling her shopping sprees, her lavish dinners, even her gym membership, all with company funds that should have been rightfully shared between us. But the most egregious betrayal, they weren't just cheating on me emotionally and physically, they were systematically plotting my financial ruin. According to their texts, Kevin intended to buy out my shares in the company for a mere fraction of their true worth. Shares I had foolishly never legally protected because my trust in him was absolute. Once I was forcibly ousted and financially vulnerable, Jessica would file for divorce, falsely claiming I had become unstable and financially irresponsible, and walk away with half of our assets while riding off into the sunset with Kevin. I sat in my own kitchen, reading about how the two people I trusted most in the world were meticulously planning my destruction, and a chilling, calculating resolve settled deep within my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was something cold, methodical, and utterly determined. It was then that I made the decision that would irrevocably alter all our lives. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to succumb to a tearful breakdown or resort to physical violence. I was going to plan. I meticulously closed the laptop, reset everything precisely as I had found it, and drove to my office, my mind already 3 steps ahead. They believed they were playing chess with me, but they had no idea. I had just seen their entire strategy laid out on the board. The transformation was methodical. I hired Marcus Chen, a divorce attorney whose reputation for protecting betrayed spouses was legendary in our state. I also brought in Rebecca Torres, a private investigator who specialized in marital infidelity cases. Within a week, I had a team working silently in the shadows while I maintained my Oscar-worthy performance at home. "We need everything documented legally," Marcus explained during our first meeting in his downtown office. "Photos, financial records, communication logs."
Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery still matters for asset division, especially with your prenup. That prenup. Jessica had insisted we were being overly cautious when I'd suggested it 10 years ago, but she'd signed it anyway. Neither of us imagined it would become the legal weapon that would leave her with nothing. Rebecca's surveillance was surgical. She confirmed what the text messages had revealed. Jessica and Kevin met twice a week at the Marriott downtown, always booking the same suite. They'd also taken 3 weekend trips together in the past 6 months, all disguised as Jessica's brand collaborations. Rebecca even discovered that Kevin was paying for Jessica's personal trainer, her dermatologist appointments, and her monthly shopping sprees at Nordstrom. But the most damaging evidence came from our company's financial records. Kevin had been systematically diverting funds to support Jessica's lifestyle, money that should have been reinvested in the business or distributed as profits. He'd created fake vendor accounts, inflated material costs, and even charged personal expenses to client projects. The theft totaled nearly $180,000 over 18 months. Meanwhile, I had to maintain my performance at home. Kissing Jessica good morning became an acting exercise. Sharing beers with Kevin after work required every ounce of self-control I possessed. The hardest part was listening to Jessica complain about our routine relationship while she planned to destroy me. "We never do anything spontaneous anymore," she'd say, scrolling through her phone in bed. "Remember when we used to surprise each other?" I wanted to tell her that I was planning the biggest surprise of her life, but instead I'd nod and suggest we plan a weekend getaway. She'd always have some excuse, a content creation deadline or a networking event, which I now knew meant another rendezvous with Kevin. 3 weeks before her birthday, I made my move on the business front. I restructured our company partnership agreement, transferring majority ownership to a new LLC I controlled. Kevin signed without reading the fine print, trusting me completely. That signature would prevent him from selling his shares without my approval and protected our client contracts from any future legal disputes. I also began documenting Jessica's tax situation. Those gifts from Kevin, the shopping sprees, trips, and payments, were never reported as income. Rebecca's investigation revealed that Jessica had received over $85,000 in unreported benefits, creating a significant tax liability that would follow her into any divorce proceedings. The psychological toll was brutal. I'd catch glimpses of myself in mirrors and see a stranger, someone harder, more calculating than I'd ever been. But every time I wavered, I'd remember reading those messages about how pathetic I was, how they almost felt sorry for me, how I was just a stepping stone to their real life together. Jessica's 38th birthday was approaching, and she was planning a massive celebration.
She'd rented the ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, invited over 100 people, and hired a professional photographer to document what she called her best year yet. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was throwing a party to celebrate the year she'd been systematically betraying me. 2 weeks before the party, I received the final piece of evidence I needed. Rebecca had managed to record a conversation between Jessica and Kevin at their usual hotel suite. In it, they discussed the timeline for destroying me. Kevin would force the buyout in January, Jessica would file for divorce in February, and by summer, they'd be living in the house Jessica and I had built together. "Tom's so trusting," Jessica's voice came through clearly on the recording. "Sometimes I think he deserves what's coming to him for being so naive." That night, I sat in my home office looking at 10 years of marriage photos on the walls and made my final decision. The birthday party wouldn't just be a celebration. It would be a reckoning. I called Marcus the next morning. "It's time," I said simply. "Are you absolutely certain about this approach?" he asked. "Once you go nuclear, there's no going back." I thought about Jessica's laugh as she mocked my trust, Kevin's handshake after stealing from our company, and 18 months of elaborate lies. "They chose nuclear when they decided to destroy me," I replied. "I'm just returning the favor." The day of Jessica's birthday party arrived with cruel perfection. Clear skies, perfect temperature, and an atmosphere of celebration that felt like the ultimate irony. Jessica spent the morning at the spa getting ready for what she'd been calling her milestone celebration. She had no idea it would become the most documented public humiliation in our city's recent history. I arrived at the Riverside Country Club 2 hours early. The AV team I'd hired was already setting up the projection system I'd requested for my surprise tribute video. Jessica thought I was planning a sweet slideshow of our marriage highlights. She was partially right. There would definitely be highlights, just not the kind she expected. The ballroom looked stunning. Jessica had spared no expense. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, and elegant table settings for 120 guests. Local influencers, business clients, our families and friends from college would all be there. Even Kevin's wife Sarah had RSVIP'd, though she'd be getting the shock of her life along with everyone else. By 7 p.m., the room was packed. Jessica looked radiant in a silver dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, a dress I now knew Kevin had paid for. She worked the room like the social media professional she was, posing for photos, air-kissing acquaintances, and soaking up the attention. Kevin arrived fashionably late with Sarah, playing the role of supportive family friend.
He even brought an expensive bottle of champagne for the birthday girl. Watching him hug Jessica in front of his own wife while maintaining that innocent smile made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. At 8:30, I clinked my champagne glass and called for everyone's attention. The room quieted, and Jessica beamed at me from the head table, probably expecting some heartfelt speech about our wonderful marriage. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Jessica's special day. I wanted to take a moment to share some memories that really capture who my wife is, and acknowledge some people who've been particularly influential in her life this year." I nodded to the AV technician, and the lights dimmed as the projector hummed to life. This first photo was taken 18 months ago during Jessica's business trip to Miami. The image that appeared on the screen wasn't from Jessica's Instagram feed. It was a photo Rebecca had obtained showing Jessica and Kevin on a hotel balcony, locked in an intimate embrace. The room fell silent, except for the sharp intake of breath from multiple guests. "And this one," I continued conversationally, as if discussing vacation slides, "shows how Kevin has been supporting Jessica's career growth.
The next slide showed bank records of Kevin's payments to Jessica, the shopping sprees, hotel bills, and gifts that totaled tens of thousands of dollars. Sarah's champagne glass shattered on the floor. Jessica had gone pale as marble. "Tom, what are you doing?" she whispered, but the microphone picked it up. "I'm sharing our truth, honey. Isn't that what you're always posting about? Authenticity." The third slide was a screenshot of their text messages. The words, "I love you more than anything," and "Tom has no idea how pathetic he is," were clearly visible. Jessica lunged for the projector, but I'd positioned security guards I'd hired near the equipment. The room erupted. Jessica's mother burst into tears. Kevin tried to leave, but found his path blocked by angry guests. Someone was already live streaming on Instagram, and I could see phones everywhere, recording what would become viral content within hours. "Wait, there's more," I announced cheerfully. "Kevin, you might want to stay for this part. It concerns your employment." The next slides showed the financial fraud, the fake vendor accounts, inflated costs, and diverted funds. Kevin's face went from red to ashen as our business clients saw exactly how he'd been stealing from projects they'd paid for. "And Jessica," I continued, turning to my wife who was now crying and trying to hide behind her hands, "the IRS will be very interested in these unreported gifts. Tax evasion is such a serious crime." The final slide was simple white text on black background. "Divorce papers will be served Monday.
I hope you both find happiness together. You deserve each other." I set down the microphone, kissed Jessica's cheek one last time, and walked out of the ballroom as chaos erupted behind me. Through the windows, I could see guests arguing, crying, and frantically making phone calls. The photographer Jessica had hired was still working, documenting the destruction of her carefully crafted image. My phone was already buzzing with calls and texts. Marcus had served the divorce papers early, hand-delivering them to Jessica at the party. Rebecca's team was simultaneously serving Kevin with lawsuits for embezzlement and fraud. By the time I reached my car, the first videos were already appearing on social media. Hashtag Jessica Birthday Exposed was trending locally within the hour. The influencer who'd built her brand on authenticity and relationship goals had just provided her audience with the most authentic content of her career. 6 months have passed since that night, and the devastation has been more complete than I ever imagined. What started as personal revenge became a case study in how quickly a carefully constructed life can completely collapse. Jessica lost everything, exactly as planned. Within 48 hours of the party, she had plummeted from 50,000 to 8,000 followers. The brands that had been paying her for lifestyle content began dropping her immediately. Luxury skincare, home decor, and fashion companies simply do not want to be associated with adultery and tax evasion. Her final Instagram post, a tearful video attempting to explain her mistakes, only exacerbated the situation. The comments were brutal. The prenup I had insisted on a decade ago became her financial death sentence. The adultery clause meant she forfeited any claim to spousal support or property division. She walked away from our marriage with only her personal belongings and approximately $12,000 in her checking account. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, all mine. But the legal consequences were merely the beginning. The IRS audit I triggered by reporting her unreported income led to penalties and back taxes totaling over $35,000. She was forced to sell her jewelry and designer wardrobe just to make the payments. The woman who once spent $500 on a skincare routine was suddenly shopping at Target. Kevin's downfall was even more gratifying to witness. The embezzlement charges I filed led to criminal prosecution. He lost his contractor's license, had to sell his house to cover legal fees and restitution, and his wife Sarah took him for everything else in their divorce. The man who had helped me build luxury homes was last seen working construction for a landscaping company in Columbus.
The beautiful irony? Jessica and Kevin's relationship imploded within 3 months of the party. It turns out their grand romance was built on the shaky foundation of my money and resources. When those disappeared, so did their love. Kevin blamed Jessica for being too obvious and getting caught. Jessica blamed Kevin for dragging her into financial fraud. They ended up hating each other more than they had ever loved. The final twist came 2 months ago when Jessica appeared at my office pleading for a second chance. She had lost weight, looked utterly exhausted, and was driving a beat-up Honda instead of the BMW I had bought her. She offered to make everything right, to repay money she didn't possess, to rebuild trust that could never truly be repaired. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I threw away everything good in my life for something that meant nothing. Please, Tom, I know you still love me." I looked at this broken woman who used to be my wife, who had spent 18 months meticulously planning my destruction, who had laughed about my naivety with her lover, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just an overwhelming emptiness. "You showed me exactly who you are, Jessica," I replied calmly. "I believe you." She didn't understand the reference to her own words from those text messages, but I did. Sometimes the most devastating response is simply accepting someone's truth about themselves. My business has never been better. Without Kevin's embezzlement and poor decisions, profits increased by 40% in the first year. I've hired new partners who genuinely contribute value instead of stealing it. The publicity from the scandal, oddly enough, brought in clients who respected how I had handled the betrayal with evidence and legal precision rather than violence or emotional outbursts. I've even started dating again. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a pediatrician I met through mutual friends, is everything Jessica wasn't. Genuine, kind, and completely unimpressed by social media metrics. She finds the entire influencer culture ridiculous, which is precisely what I need in my life. But I would be lying if I said the entire experience didn't change me. I'm more guarded now, more acutely aware of the masks people wear. I have security cameras in my home office and separate accounting for all my business ventures. Trust, once so completely shattered, does not rebuild easily. Some people have asked if I went too far, if the public humiliation was unnecessarily cruel. My answer is simple. They had 18 months to come clean, to end their affair, to handle their betrayal with some semblance of dignity. Instead, they chose to plan my financial destruction while pretending to care about me. They chose to mock my trust while readily accepting my friendship and love. I simply gave them the same level of consideration they had given me. Jessica and Kevin believed they were playing chess with someone who was unaware the game had even begun. They spent so much time meticulously planning their victory that they never once considered what would happen if their opponent was, in fact, 3 moves ahead the entire time. They lost everything: their reputations, their relationships, their financial security, and ultimately, each other.
I retained everything that truly mattered and gained something I had never possessed before: absolute certainty about whom I can truly trust. So tell me, Reddit, was I the villain in this story or merely someone who refused to be a victim? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama. Got a take on the situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you.